You need to know. The Bible has already revealed where the Antichrist will come from. While the world is distracted, the signs are right before our eyes. Could it be that ancient prophecies are already coming true? And what if I told you that the answer is in the scriptures? You need to know. What the Bible reveals about the origin of the Antichrist is more shocking than you think. Stay with me until the end, because this truth can change everything. What comes next will surprise you. If you think you know everything about biblical prophecies, get ready for a revelation that may change your perspective. Most people imagine the Antichrist as a dark figure who will suddenly emerge. But what if I told you that the Bible has already given us clear clues about his origin? Yes, the scriptures not only prophesy his coming but also indicate where he will arise from. The answer may be quite different from what you imagine. For centuries, scholars and theologians have sought to decipher the signs scattered throughout the books of Daniel, Revelation, and 2 Thessalonians. There are theories pointing to a world government, others suggesting a connection with past empires, and some even speaking of a deception so deep that few will notice when it happens. The most impressive part? The signs are already around us, and many people are not paying attention. But don't worry, because in this video you will understand all of this clearly and in detail. We will analyze what the Bible actually says, debunk myths, and reveal truths that few dare to speak about. So stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover may completely change your view of the end times. Moses was one of the greatest spiritual leaders in history, leading the Hebrew people from Egypt to the doorstep of the Promised Land. However, one of the most intriguing mysteries in the Bible is what happened to his body after his death. According to Deuteronomy, Moses died on Mount Nebo, only having a vision of the Promised Land, but not being able to enter it. The most curious part? The scriptures themselves state that God buried him, and to this day no one knows where. Unlike other great biblical leaders who had known and revered graves, Moses' body was simply hidden. But why? The absence of a visible tomb has opened doors to countless speculations and theological debates. Some scholars believe that God hid the body to prevent it from becoming an object of idolatry. Others see an even greater mystery, revealing a connection between the disappearance and the appearance of Moses during Jesus' transfiguration, alongside Elijah. The book of Jude mentions a dispute between the archangel Michael and Satan over Moses' body, adding even more mystery to the enigma. What really happened at that moment? If we analyze the context, we can see that Moses' story does not end on Mount Nebo. His legacy continues to live on, transcending generations and impacting even today. But if the body of such a great leader simply vanished, what does that mean? Could God be sending a message? And why would the enemy have an interest in Moses' body? Questions like these lead us deeper into biblical mysteries and prepare us to understand the next great moment in history. From birth, Moses was destined for something great. At a time when Pharaoh ordered the death of Hebrew babies, his mother, driven by faith, placed him in a basket and set him adrift on the Nile. Fate, or rather, divine intervention, led him to be found by Pharaoh's daughter and raised in the Egyptian palace. A Hebrew, living as an Egyptian prince. It sounds like the plot of a movie, doesn't it? But this duality shaped his entire journey, because despite the luxury, Moses never forgot his origins and the cry of his enslaved people. What makes Moses so central in biblical history is not just his leadership, but the fact that he was chosen to free Israel. He not only witnessed but was the instrument of God's miracles, from the plagues that struck Egypt to the parting of the Red Sea. He was also the mediator between God and the Hebrews, receiving divine instructions directly on Mount Sinai. It is impossible to talk about the history of Judeo-Christian faith without mentioning his influence. His actions and teachings shaped the identity of a people and established a spiritual foundation that echoes to this day. But despite all this greatness, Moses was not a perfect man. He had his flaws, fears, and even hesitations. In several biblical passages, we see his internal struggle between faith and his human limitations. This teaches us a profound lesson. God does not choose the capable, but enables those he chooses. And in this process, Moses' journey was just beginning. Moses had long left Egypt and was living a peaceful life as a shepherd in the wilderness of Midian, far from the intrigues of Pharaoh's court and the oppression of the Hebrews. But God had other plans. On an ordinary day while tending his flock, he saw something extraordinary, a burning bush that was aflame but was not consumed. Curious, he approached, and at that moment, he heard the voice of God himself. "Moses, Moses." Called by name, He had no choice but to listen. There, in front of the divine fire, his life would change forever. The mission God gave him was not simple. He was to return to Egypt, confront the most powerful man of his time, and demand the liberation of the Hebrew people. Moses, however, hesitated. How could he, a simple shepherd, challenge Pharaoh? He argued, tried to evade the task, and even claimed he was not eloquent enough for it. But God was not looking for a perfect speaker. He wanted a willing leader. To reassure him, the Lord performed miracles right there. He turned Moses' staff into a serpent and made his hand leprous, demonstrating that the power would not come from Moses, but from God himself. The burning bush represents that crucial moment when a person realizes their life has a greater purpose. How many times do we ignore the signs around us because we feel incapable or insecure? But God always enables those he calls. Moses received a command, and even though he hesitated, he accepted the challenge. What he did not yet know was that this was only the beginning of a journey filled with miracles, trials, and an impact that would echo throughout history. The moment had finally arrived. After confronting Pharaoh, plagues devastating Egypt, and the firstborns perishing, the Hebrew people were set free. Moses led them out of Egypt toward the Promised Land. But just as they began their journey, they found themselves trapped. Before them lay the Red Sea, and behind them Pharaoh's army was in pursuit. Then, one of the greatest miracles in history occurred. At God's command, Moses stretched out his staff, and the Red Sea parted, creating a path through the water so that the people could cross. And when the Egyptian army attempted to follow, the sea closed over them, wiping them out completely. Throughout the desert journey, the miracles continued. God not only delivered the people from slavery, but also sustained them every step of the way. Manna fell from the sky to feed them. Water sprang from unexpected places, like the rock at Meribah, and a divine cloud guided the Hebrews by day, while a pillar of fire illuminated the nights. It was a clear demonstration that God was present, leading them as a true spiritual guide. Yet even in the face of so many wonders, the people still complained and doubted. Human nature finds it hard to trust, even when witnessing miracles firsthand. Each miracle in the Exodus teaches a valuable lesson. Faith is not just about seeing to believe, but about trusting even when everything seems impossible. Moses was the instrument God used to perform these wonders, but with each new challenge, it became clear that the people's hearts were not yet fully transformed, and this would have serious consequences for the future of their journey. After the miraculous crossing of the Red Sea and the challenges of traveling through the desert, God called Moses for a divine encounter on Mount Sinai. There, in the vastness of the mountain, surrounded by clouds and thunder, he received one of the greatest spiritual milestones in history, the stone tablets containing the 10 Commandments. These were more than just simple rules. They were guidelines for a people who needed to learn how to live as a nation, with principles of justice, faith, and communion with God. The moment was so intense that the mountain itself trembled, and only Moses had the privilege of standing face to face with divine glory. But while Moses was on the mountain, something troubling was happening in the camp. The people, impatient with his delay, decided to create a golden calf to worship, returning to the pagan customs of Egypt. This scene reveals human weakness. Despite witnessing so many miracles, the tendency to stray from God was still present. When Moses descended and saw the idolatry, he was overcome with rage. He smashed the stone tablets, symbolizing that the people had broken their covenant with God. The punishment was harsh, but necessary. After all, how could they enter the Promised Land without a transformed heart? This episode teaches a powerful lesson. Physical freedom means nothing without spiritual liberation. God did not just want to take the Hebrews out of Egypt, he wanted to take Egypt out of them. Moses, as a great spiritual leader, interceded for the people, received new tablets, and reaffirmed the divine covenant. But their disobedience would still come at a high price in the following chapters of their journey. After years of leading the Hebrews through the wilderness, Moses was approaching the completion of his mission. The Promised Land was no longer a distant dream, but an achievable destination. However, a mistake made along the way would change his fate. In Numbers 20, we see a crucial event. The people were thirsty, and once again, complained against God and Moses. The Lord commanded Moses to speak to a rock, and from it water would flow. But irritated by the people's rebellion, Moses, instead of simply speaking, struck the rock with his staff twice, and it was there that his sentence was pronounced. The act may seem small, but in God's logic, every detail has profound meaning. By striking the rock, Moses directly disobeyed God, and worse, he attributed the miracle to himself when he said, "Hear now, you rebels. Must we bring water for you out of this rock?" Numbers 20:10. This demonstrated a lack of faith and dishonored God as holiness before the people. As a consequence, God told him that he would not enter the promised land. It was a severe decision, but it reinforced an important principle. Even the greatest leaders are subject to divine discipline. The punishment of Moses teaches us about responsibility and consequences. He saw the land from a distance, but he would not step foot in it. His role was to lead the people to that point, but the conquest would be with Joshua. Sometimes we face frustrations when our plans do not go as we want, but that does not mean that God does not have a greater purpose. And before departing, Moses would still have one last significant moment on Mount Nebo. Moses' journey was coming to an end. After leading the Hebrews through the wilderness for 40 years, God took him to Mount Nebo, where he would have his final glimpse of the promised land. From there, Moses looked out over the hills, valleys, and the land that had been promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But as had already been determined, he would not be allowed to enter. It was a solemn moment, a realization of both accomplishment and farewell. He had fulfilled his role as a spiritual leader, but his mission ended there. Unlike other great biblical figures, Moses did not have a known grave. The Bible itself states that God buried him, and no one knows where. This detail has fueled mysteries and interpretations throughout history. Could it have been a way to prevent his burial site from becoming an object of idolatry? Or was there an even deeper purpose behind this secrecy? The book of Jude mentions a dispute between the archangel Michael and Satan over Moses' body, raising even more questions about his role in God's divine plan. Even though he never physically entered the promised land, Moses left behind a legacy that transcends centuries. His name echoes through history as one of the greatest leaders of all time, a man who defied kings, parted seas, and spoke with God face to face. But if his journey ended there, what does that mean for us today? Could the mystery surrounding his disappearance hold an even greater significance than we realize? Now that you know all of this, I ask you, are you prepared for the times ahead? Biblical prophecies are not just ancient stories. They are living signs that are unfolding before our eyes. The big question is, are you paying attention, or are you letting these truths go unnoticed? What impresses me the most is that many people live as if none of this is real. But after everything we've discussed here, does it make sense to ignore the signs? If you truly want to go deeper, study more, and be spiritually prepared, then I challenge you. Start now. Read the books of Daniel and Revelation. Observe the events happening around you. And most importantly, share this knowledge with others. After all, the more people know the truth, the less impact lies will have. And before you leave, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because here, we dive into topics that no one else dares to talk about. Leave a comment telling me what stood out to you the most, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this. See you in the next content.